Hello and welcome to CreekWatch. My name's Reed, this is Sid, and today we're going to walk you through how to collect a phosphorus sample on your creek.
So what type of phosphate are we testing for today?
Today we are looking at orthophosphate. It's one of a couple different types of phosphate out there, but it's one that we're easily able to test and we can collect accurate and credible results really simply with this kit right here.
So for this test, you're going to need a stopwatch or a timer. And first and foremost, you're always going to put on your safety glasses. So
Absolutely.
I'll do that now.
Safety first. All right, so let's open the kit and see what we have in here. So what do we got in here, Sid?
So we have 2 square glass bottles that we're going to collect our samples from. We have a comparative box with a colorimeter wheel that has 2 test tubes, and then we have our chemical packets. So one thing that's super important with this test is that we want to keep track of which tube we have our prepared and unprepared sample in. So take your time and just keep it consistent with where you put things.
Excellent. So what do we need to do first?
We're going to go collect our water sample both in the square glass bottles, and we're going to fill this up to the 20 ml line on both of these, which is the second top line on the square glass bottles. So I've now filled our square glass bottles up to the 20 ml line. So now we can add our chemical reagent. Just gonna cut it open and make sure that you have your trash bag on hand to put all your chemical packets in. So I'm gonna put the chemical into this square glass bottle. That's gonna be our prepared sample. And pour that in.
Trash, there we go.
And give it a little swirl to make sure that chemical is mixed into our sample. And we now have to wait 8 minutes for our sample to react with that chemical.
Okay, now we wait. Now while you're waiting, this is a good time to start one of your other tests that you can get done in those 8 minutes.
Okay, Reed, it has been 8 minutes, so what are we gonna do next?
All right, so now we want to take our prepared sample. Which one did you put chemical in again?
This is the one with
There you
chemical.
go, so you still remembered. So we want to make sure we put the prepared chemical in the square glass bottle into our test tube that's on the inside of the colorimeter. So I'll let you do that. You got the safety glasses on.
Yes, so
Safety
we're gonna
first.
fill it up to that top line on our test tube.
Perfect.
And put that back into the comparative box. And now I'm taking the sample that's been unprepared, so it has no chemical in it.
Just creek water, right?
Exactly. Onto this left side of this comparative box. Again, I'm gonna fill it up to that top line.
So chemical on the inside and creek water always on the outside, right?
Correct. And now we can measure the level of phosphate in there.
Okay, so now what? Now it's time for the eye test, right?
It's time for the
We're
eye
gonna do
test.
an eye test. Everybody gets an eye test today. What are we trying to look at here?
If we have a high level of phosphate in our sample is going to turn blue. So our comparative box can really help when it doesn't look like it might be blue. We're going to match up these 2 windows together, and then that will correspond to the reading on the colorimeter wheel.
Okay, let me give that to you and let's give it a shot. So you always want to look at a nice bright background, so you kind of got some sky in behind us here. This is excellent. And give that wheel a spin and see where we end up here.
I'm gonna say that that is pretty close right there on number 2. Why don't you take a look?
Okay, yeah, 2 looks good to me.
Okay, so what now does this 2 on our colorimeter wheel correspond to in terms of phosphate?
Does that equal 2 milligrams per liter?
It does not.
Does not, no. So in order for us to decipher what we have on our colorimeter wheel, we have our conversion chart right here. So if we're looking at our conversion chart, we've got if the wheel reads and record this value in milligrams per liter. So when we're looking at 2, where does 2 land on this?
So 2 is going to correspond to 0.04 milligrams per liter, and this falls into our healthy level of phosphate in our creek.
Okay, so when you're talking about healthy, so what are the values that go into the borderline healthy or the unhealthy values?
So a healthy level of phosphate is going to be anything from 0.01 to 0.05 milligrams per liter, and borderline healthy is going to be 0.05 to 0.1 milligrams per liter. Anything above 0.1 is going to correspond to an unhealthy level of phosphate.
Okay. Now, do you ever get any high readings like that when you're doing your creek sampling?
Sometimes we can have high levels after a stormwater event. So when there's a big rain, you're gonna have water rushing across lawns. It's gonna pick up excess fertilizer, as you mentioned, that dog poop that isn't picked up, and that's gonna spike our levels up. So that's typically when you'd see a higher level.
Okay, but naturally there's always at least a little bit of phosphorus,
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
Okay. Now we gotta figure out what are we gonna do with all the wastewater?
So we have these prepared and unprepared samples. So I'm going to take my test tube that has that chemical in it, and I'm gonna dump that into my wastewater. I have this test tube that has clean creek water in it, so I'm gonna pour that into my test tube to be able to rinse that out. There we go.
Excellent.
And then also, this was their square bottle that also had the chemical in it, so I'm gonna dump that out right away.
You remembered.
Yep, and then we've got a little bit left of that clean creek water that I am again going to put in there to give it a rinse.
There you go, all wrapped up. Now we just gotta put it back together and we're ready for our next sampling.
Yeah, perfect.